And welcome back to the Secluded Paradyme, peeps. I hope you enjoyed that excellently put together video by VCW360 of YouTube.com in dedication to the late great Brian Pillman. Essentially, it was a video montage of Brian's career in WCW, ECW, and of course, his final stint in the WWE. Well, folks, prior to the video, I did say I will discuss some of my favorite Brian Pillman matches and moments during his stellar career, and I might as well just get right down to business for you. I picked out three matches in particular that I thoroughly enjoyed in regards to Brian's career, and every time I think of these matches, I immediately think of Brian in a good light, definitely. So I'll just like to expand some of my perspective on these matches, tell you what they meant to me, and definitely recommend that you check these out. For any fan that has never watched Brian Pillman, I would say check these three matches out, and you would definitely get a good idea of who he was, as a wrestler, how he portrayed his gimmick, and just looking at some of his great moments as a wrestler in the ring, and being able to put together all those great skills, which makes such a great wrestler. Now, the first match I would like to discuss what occurred in Halloween Havoc 1989. It was between the Total Package Lex Luger and, of course, Flying Brian Pillman for the United States Heavyweight Championship. For me, this match was the antithesis of Brian's career. His courage, his strength, his charisma, they all showed in this particular match. For a guy of his size and his caliber to hang with someone of the size of Lex Luger, really something I wouldn't say new at the time, but it was definitely something quite interesting on WCW television in late 1989. Basically, Luger was just coming into the company. Brian was simply just coming into the company. Really didn't have tons of exposure prior to this event. He was on WCW television for just a few months, and he's now facing Lex Luger, who is now a prima donna heel. He's returned back to his heel character that he was in the Horsemen, just now more vocal, and he is the United States Heavyweight Champion at the time, fresh off of his defeat of Michael Hayes to recapture the championship just several months prior to this event. But nevertheless, Lex Luger is the United States Champion. Brian Pillman is the challenger. You have the great announcers in Jim Ross and Bob Caudle calling just an excellent match. And speaking of, not meaning to go off kilter here, but if you want to listen to how wrestling used to be called in the late 80s, I definitely recommend that you listen to this match and listen to Jim Ross and Bob Caudle as they put over the wrestlers. And they, instead of talking about this angle and talking about, making all kind of stupid gay jokes like Taz and Michael Cole and whatnot, you have Bob Caudle and you have Jim Ross who are actually telling you a story, and it seems like they're calling a sport, not necessarily an sport, so-called entertainment art form. You're calling a legitimate sport, it seems, and talking about where they went to college, how Lex Luger is a 3-year pro, and already he has won the United States Championship 3 times. Brian Pillman only in the sport for 2.5 years, and you see where he is. Just a great way to call a wrestling match, the right way, in my opinion, to call a wrestling match, and I wish they'll get right back to it. But nevertheless, speaking of the match, although Brian Pillman did not walk out of the Philadelphia Civic Center as the United States Heavyweight Champion, he showcased to the entire world of what kind of wrestler he was, what kind of high flyer, mixing with the high flying and the psychology that he would soon portray in World Championship Wrestling when he teamed with people such as the Z-Man and Stunning Steve Austin with the Hollywood Blondes. This was, I would say, the blueprint for Flying Brian Pillman in World Championship Wrestling. I'm not going to talk about every aspect of the match, but that was just enough to get you just a good understanding of what the match was, and so that you could go out either through YouTube.com or on eBay trying to find the Halloween Havoc 1989 tape, just so that you could possibly get this match. It's an excellent match, and I highly recommend it. The second match I'd like to discuss occurred at Super Brawl 19 and 91 in St. Petersburg, Florida, at the Bayfront Center in St. Pete. It occurred on May 19th, 1991. I remember the event, 6 years old. My father actually recorded it for me. I don't have the master tape now, but matter of fact, I do. I have the master tape, but I don't have the original copy in which my father recorded. But it was the culmination of a long winter and spring feud between Big Barry Windham of the Four Horsemen and Flying Brian Pillman. As many recall, Brian Pillman and Barry Windham in their feud in early 1991. Everyone, I think, at the time, sort of felt that it was kind of a weird feud to put someone big as Barry Windham in stature, not necessarily in perception, but in stature against Brian Pillman. It just didn't match well. But I disagree. I think those two had a really good, fiery feud. I think WCW could have done a whole lot more in building this feud. But nevertheless, both guys put on a stellar performance in 1991 at Super Brawl in 1991. It was billed as a taped fist match. And for those who haven't seen a taped fist match, it's essentially the competitors literally putting on athletic tape. And if you ever have seen athletic tape, it's really strong. It's hard to break apart. It takes a lot of strength to break the tape apart. It's meant for stability for the athletes, strength, and really to keep the muscles and the joints tight. And in regards to a wrestling match, if you use taped fists, it's implied that since the muscles are intact, they're stronger, they're connected, really in tight, really strong, that it would be a weapon, and it's at a disadvantage for the opponent under those conditions. Well, both had taped fists on, and they were really slugging it out. This was not a long match at all. I'm not even sure if it went 10 minutes, but it was really brutal, really blunt. But both got what they wanted out of the angle. To make a long story short, Barry Windham wins the match, but they would soon even have a bigger brawl right during the finish of the NWA World Television Championship match between Double A Arn Anderson, who was the champion, and Beautiful Bobby Eaton at the time, in which Barry Windham would try to run in and save Arn Anderson from Bobby Eaton's attack on him, only to have Brian Pillman come down the ramp and beat the crap out of Barry Windham all the way back to the back, in which eventually allowed Beautiful Bobby Eaton to hit one of personally my favorite finisher of all time, the Alabama Jam on Arn Anderson, perfectly done, and Bobby Eaton wins the championship. But the feud, I guess WCW just wanted to show that the feud wasn't over, and it eventually culminated at a Clash of the Champions prior to the Great American Bash of 1991, in which Barry Windham and his team defeated Elegante and Flying Brian Pillman, which eventually led to Brian Pillman leaving World Championship Wrestling under those stipulations. It was a work. He had to leave World Championship Wrestling for a while, and indefinitely, I believe. And that's where the Yellow Dog stuff eventually came into play, in which Brian Pillman wrestled under a mask as the assumed Yellow Dog gimmick. Another Jim Hurt creation, go figure. But that was the gist of that feud, and I definitely recommend that you check out Super Brawl 1991 between Barry Windham and Brian Pillman. Very short, very succinct, but it's a darn good match that will definitely leave you entertained at the end. My final match is between, I mentioned this earlier on the show, Jushin Thunder Liger versus Brian Pillman for the WCW World Light Heavyweight Championship belt. Nothing really needs to be said. Except that was the best Light Heavyweight Championship match ever in WCW's brief history for that division. But I still consider it the best Light Heavyweight / Cruiserweight match I've ever seen. Those two had a really knockout, drag-out fight prior to that event in Tokyo, Japan, for